Right, thank you. A great chance to catch up with everybody. I want this to go on to Mighty Networks and to Rumble. I was going to do an update a little while ago, but it just didn't transpire. And really, I'm wanting to, I won't spend too long on this, but it's in response really to something that Sky Prince has very recently put out. And I never really want anything to be personal. Everything should be at a much wider level, should be at a business approach. And so for those of you who've not heard her video, in fact, I think she's done 3 or 4 now. If you've not heard it, then it might be a little bit difficult to grasp what's going on here. And then I'll just very basically touch on her. I think, first of all, I would say that, Connecting Consciousness is a spiritual organization that has a wide church, literally. And we tend to respect people's faiths or their beliefs. It's a fundamental tenet of respect. Now, I've actually watched personally some of the videos that Sky Prince has put out. It's not someone telling me what she said. She's laughs at and is very disparaging of Jesus Christ. She says that President Trump has failed humanity. She says the American military have failed humanity. She said that she's no longer interested in spirituality, and she makes a joke about unicorns and rainbows. And she basically says that, that President Trump has made the world a worse place since he's come to office. And then I think she's calling on influencers to join her and change what's happening and make the RV go ahead and take on the white hats. I know that Wolverine has responded fairly cautiously to that. I've seen one of his reports. Now, we have an awful lot in numbers of veterans from all over the world in our organization who want to believe that they served for the betterment of their own country and for the world at large. Why else would you do it? What was it all about? And there are times in history, predominantly where America, but not exclusively so, has taken action and done things that have adversely affected people's lives. That's a fact. But that isn't President Trump's doing in the 1950s or the 60s or the 1970s or the 1980s or the 1990s. There are other people who are responsible for what's occurred. And to say that President Trump has made the world a worse place is to show that you don't have the full picture. The number of positive actions that have occurred under his time in office have been phenomenal, but the vast majority of them cannot be reported. Not because the president doesn't necessarily trust the people to have the story, but there are still a considerable number of bad guys at large who, if they weren't kept hopping from one foot to the other, would cause a great deal of problems. Those of you who followed me know that I like Arthur Conan Doyle's stories of Sherlock Holmes. And if you're familiar with the stories, you won't have any problem in me telling you about the Reichenbach Falls, where Sherlock's arch enemy is Professor Moriarty. And basically, Sherlock Holmes defeats Professor Moriarty. But although he's taken the head of the snake off, in the stories, it's not the end of the operation, because Colonel Sebastian Moran, Moriarty's right-hand man, then goes to try to kill Sherlock. And the point that I'm making here is that you don't just remove one person, you have to remove a whole tier of people, and sometimes more than that. And that takes a great deal of time, and you can't go asking the local newspaper to carry a story on that. So when people think that nothing's happening, it's sadly because that information cannot be put out. So in respect of all of the veterans and indeed a considerable number of serving men and women in our organization who would look to me to put out our point of view. If you have a ship and it has a captain, it is the captain that decides which direction the ship travels in. The crew can tell the direction of the ship and therefore the captain's mind from the way that that ship is going. And as long as, you know, our ship is in the way it is, and it will be for a considerable time to come, you know, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America military forces can continue to count on the support of connecting consciousness. Now, in terms of making jokes that unfortunately Sky Prince did about spiritual topics, and of course Becky's ears pricked up then because, you know, she leads very largely with other members of the team to deliver those. Sky Prince makes great jokes about the unicorns. Now, I've never seen a unicorn. I haven't. But does that mean they don't exist? I'm very privileged to have seen on ex-CIA and NSA cutting-edge technology cameras. I've been very privileged to see what people would call a fairy. We would actually correctly call them an elemental. And these cameras, absolutely state-of-the-art, much more advanced than anything even a big cinema company or a television company would have. You know, when 2001: A Space Odyssey was being filmed, Stanley Kubrick was gifted a number of, I think they were German or they Japanese, either German or Japanese, some very, very, very special cameras, which came from an interesting route. So I have seen, and the provenance for me is unquestionable, that elementals exist. So I wouldn't, you know, want to laugh at that. And in terms of, you know, disparaging about rainbows, if you were to look at the Bible, God said that the bow, what's referred to as the bow, the rainbow, was provided as a covenant between God and humanity, that never again would a flood be sent to devastate the earth in the way it was. So a rainbow is very, very strongly connected into religion. And in our organization, we have large numbers of Jews, Christians, Muslims. Just about every religion on the planet is with us. And, you know, one wouldn't make jokes about that. You just out of respect, you wouldn't. And so when people are being disparaging about Jesus Christ, and then sort of saying that, you know, that Trump has made the world worse and the American military have made the world worse, you probably wouldn't have many friends left. And, you know, it's very important that the wider picture comes forward here. We don't, as an organization, feel that the RV is failing. I certainly don't. The information that I'm very fortunate enough to be given shows me that it is progressing at a pretty quick rate, that it is very much coming down the tracks, and that from our perspective, you know, oh sure, I'd love it to be tomorrow. I really would. I'd love it to be yesterday, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But it couldn't have been. President Kennedy, the right man, president, the right place, America, the wrong time. The earth wasn't ready for it. And so a year ago, we weren't ready for the RV. No matter how much people want it because they want to get their money or they want to do this or do that, whether it's a greedy reason or whether it's an altruistic reason, you know, people suffering and dying, it'll happen when it's ready to happen. And, you know, it's about, you know, trusting the plan and comments like that. Well, it's a better plan than I've got. You know, I'm not responsible for the RV. I'm not responsible for its timing, but there are people that actually are. So they must have a plan. And if you don't trust the plan, then you don't trust the people behind it. And if you don't trust the people behind it, who do you trust? You know, there is something that's bigger than President Trump here. You know, now whether you believe in the word or term God as a majestic fellow in a jewel-studded seat in the sky, or whether you see it as a unseen creational energy, doesn't actually matter, because God is God. And I wouldn't even attempt to understand, you know, the thinking or the thought processes or the plans going on. But, you know, that is something that we believe in. So if you have some insight into predominantly the RV, then you have a very different opinion or a different take on those who don't have that expertise and are calling for it immediately and are blaming people for it not happening. One of the commentators talked about the D-Day. He got the date wrong. He said it was January 1944. And the actual day of D-Day was June 9th. Well, the month was June 1944, 6th. And the commentator was saying about, you know, how they had to send out disinformation and keep the enemy guessing, and that's absolutely correct. But my take on D-Day is that you think, was it a million American soldiers? Goodness knows how many British, Aussie, New Zealanders, Canadians, Indians. I don't mean indigenous Indians from India, and other nations who landed on the shores of France to liberate basically the world from Nazi tyranny. That operation was thousands of ships, thousands of aeroplanes, everything from Operation Pluto to get that pipeline from England across to France with the diesel, to the food side of it, the medical side of it, artillery shells, all of that. This operation, which we dismiss with the two letters RV, is greater in its concept and it's greater in its complexity than the D-Day operation. That is why it can't happen at the snap of a fingers, or as I said in one of those videos, a press of a button. It is not launching a rocket. Mind you, have to see all the checks and the double checks and the triple checks before you press the button. It's a once, not just in a lifetime, this is once in the humanity's chance to break free. And the people who are behind it are not going to make any errors and mistakes. And I'm sorry that it doesn't go at the speed that we all want, but it goes at the speed it has to go at. So this isn't a personal move. This isn't anything like that. This is a much larger take on the whole of this concept, because it appears that, you know, we've got one train of thought going in one direction, which is, you know, Trump doesn't care about humanity. The American military don't care about humanity. You know, join me and overturn the white hats, and, you know, let's bring the RV about. And then you've got the other side, which is saying that's not actually the right view to take. It's actually not correct. And so, you know, it's beholden on me, on behalf of Connecting Consciousness, to state again, you know, where we are as an organization, what we believe in, and the values that we hold true. And so I won't be joining any dissenting group who want to, you know, say that the American military has failed, or Trump has failed, or, you know, the spirituality side of it doesn't work, or, you know, any of that sort of thing. You know, the number of children that have literally been rescued from undescribable situations have only come about because the President of the United States pushed all of that forward to make that happen. But you don't see that in the newspapers. You don't see that in the Stars and Stripes. But you won't, because you can't afford to be at this stage, because the world is not ready for it. You as an individual listening to me may well be ready for it. but the vast majority of people are not yet ready for that. And you could lay all of the truths down in one go. You'd probably have a collapse in the economy. And the truth must come out, but it must come out controlled. And I do believe that everyone should have access to the truth, but not necessarily all on a Tuesday. So my point is that we need to respect individuals. It's very easy to attack somebody like the President of the United States. It's very easy to attack the American military. What that would immediately say to me is that anyone who subscribes to that view clearly doesn't have any friends in the United States military. How could you make statements like that and then have either a friendship or a business relationship with anyone who has served or is serving currently in the United States, or any military for that matter, because they're all brothers or sisters together? So by a person's words, we may judge them, and we may form an opinion of the influence that person has or that group of people have, and the type of show that they associate with. So if somebody has some connections to the chain of command, then you wouldn't make disparaging comments, and you certainly wouldn't be rude about Jesus Christ. I wouldn't be rude about the prophet. Just because I'm not a Muslim doesn't give me the right to be rude about the prophet or any other religious body. I should respect that. So people can cause an awful lot of harm and a lot of damage by the words, ill-thought comments that they make. The world is full of hotheads, but it requires cool, calm, collective thinking to deliver a very large operation that will benefit positively the vast majority of humanity, that can only go at the speed that it can go at. And for people who don't appreciate that or don't understand that, that is an indication that they are nowhere involved in that chain of command. So I want to make it very clear that connecting consciousness disassociates itself with any criticism in this regard with the American military, any criticism in this regard of President Trump, though I refer to him as the commander-in-chief in these actions, but the president. We do value spirituality very much so. And I won't even make jokes about unicorns. And in terms of the world being a worse place under President Trump, is to fully fail to grasp the whole picture. There is a war going on between Israel, joined with America, against Iran. But memories must be very short, because there was an American warship that was blown up by the Iranian agents, and hundreds of American sailors were killed or wounded. There have been diplomatic incidents in London where the Iranians were involved. There have been hostage situations in airplanes, etc., where the Iranians have been involved. And this isn't something that's just come out of the blue. President Trump didn't just decide, oh, we're going to do this. This is something that a number of United States presidents failed to deal with. In fact, I think it's fair to say that, in particular, one president decided to pay off to buy time. Now, that's an age-old issue. If you can't beat somebody or you don't want to beat them, you give them gold and you pay them. You pay them to leave you alone. The American, I beg your pardon, the ancient Roman Empire did that with some of the German tribes when they did not have enough the Roman soldiers to fight the German tribes. So they bribed them, they bought them off. Well, at least this president has stopped all that. At least this president is saying, let's try and sort this out for once and for all. So you see, my take on it is completely different than some of these people. And I think it's incredibly disrespectful to claim that any military in the world has failed humanity. Remember, there are two big world wars, World War One and World War Two. The common, I'm using the word loosely here, the common soldier wasn't responsible for those wars. It was politicians who were seeking with the financiers to obtain whatever it was they wanted to obtain. And presidents or leaders of the world have always been influenced by money and power, and have done things which the common man and woman have had no benefit from. Under President Trump, that is completely not the case. We would, as an organization, not associate ourselves with the American military if we felt that they were in any shape or form corrupted. They're not. So this is not a personal dig or personal attack. This is a much wider statement on predominantly the RV, because this is what's brought this about, that the RV has not happened yet. It's been put back and put back and put back. This is to fail to grasp that there are still, just like in Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories, there are still a number of people who are deep staters, quite evil, who, if they understood the time frame, would be able to influence things. It's SEAL Team 6, you know, those of you who are in the military, why would you advertise a location prior to an operation? You know exactly what I'm talking about if you're in the Pentagon. And so it's natural disinformation that goes out. I mean, let's talk about I think it's the Indianapolis motor car race, and I think this kicked it all off. Well, that's just disinformation. You shouldn't get all excited and angry and annoyed that someone has said, oh, well, the key players are all at the race meeting, therefore we can't do the 0800 numbers. All of that is just BS. All of it. It's just, if you're listening to that and you're drawing your conclusions and your belief systems from that, then what will happen is when you physically die, your soul will be recycled and you'll come back here because you've clearly got a lot more to learn. All of this material is designed to disassociate a person's mind from what's really going on. You know, you yourself know that a magician will say, look here, while he or she manipulates something over there. That's clearly what it's about. And we shouldn't get excited because someone gives us something that is nonsensical. It is nonsensical. It's not true. And everyone who's aware of my position regarding the RV knows how I feel about the so-called 0800 numbers. And I feel very strongly that there is absolutely nobody on this planet who is going to go into a so-called redemption center with a 100 trillion Zimbabwe note and come out with 100 trillion United States dollars or USN dollars. It's just not going to happen. So if somebody is telling you that you can go in and get quintillions worth, and I've heard one person over the last 4 years on 3 occasions say that individuals, ordinary people, will be able to go into a redemption center and get quintillions out. It's just so disassociated from reality that one would have to ask, why is this information being put out? You know, I get it that during wartime, dead officers were floated on the ocean with fake maps. So when the Germans picked them up, they looked at the maps, they thought, all right, that's where this is going to happen. Or an airplane crashes and there's a map in there. That's where they're going to attack. This is classic stuff. But to talk about someone being able to receive $100 trillion, and then you just sign an NDA for 30 days. You know, I think it must be to test people's grounding in reality. People want things to happen. People have been oppressed for too long. But this isn't the way out of it. The way out of it is through hard work, through commitment, through a commitment to God, actually, whatever, God or your prophet, whatever, it doesn't matter. A commitment to that, a rejection of evil, a rejection of corruption, and to want to do the best you can for humanity, but not the quick fix. Because that, again, and it was Becky that said to me, the problem with humanity is that it's incredibly impatient, and wants the quick fix. And the higher up you are in an organization, the more you realize that that quick fix doesn't exist. There are certain stages of operations you have to go through to achieve something. Any of you who've watched a rocket launch will see the days of checking and triple checking that has to occur, because it's so important. If you make one mistake, then that whole thing is put off. So that's where we stand. We don't go back on that. Oh, and those of you who've given donations, I want to thank you very much indeed. Always gratefully appreciated. It keeps the four wheels on this wagon rolling along. Thank you, and God bless to everyone.